Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Java, offered to you by the Clifton Park Half Moon Library. My name is Scott Bartow, and I'll be teaching 4 one-hour sessions offered to you on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. For all those that registered with the Clifton Park Half Moon Library, I will be sending out an invitation to my Google Classroom, where you can find the exercises that will be offered after each one-hour session, and also you'll be able to communicate with me if you have any questions or if there are any problems that I can address through Google Classroom. So if you look at my screen right now, you can see that, let's see, I will stop the video. Okay, so you can see that I am using W3 School's Try Java application, and so if you look at the address of the website I'm using, so it's w3schools.com/java/tryjava.asp ? File name equals demo_hello world. Okay, so when you run the exercises, I want you to go into this website, and off to the left, you can enter your code. And then when your code is ready, you just click on this green run button, and that will, through W3 School's application, that will compile your Java code and run it at the same time. I didn't want to go into having you download Java. Java is free, it's open source. And I didn't want you to have to go through downloading Java and then setting up your environment variables where Java is included in the path in the right way. And by doing it that way, you would have to go onto the command line, and you would have to compile your Java program, and then you would have to, through the command line, you would then have to run your Java program. So I figured this is a whole lot easier to be able to teach with, and to be able to have you do the exercises at home and be able to practice using Java. So once again, the address is right up here in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. So you have Java, w3schools.com/java/tryjava.asp. So give that a try, and if you have any questions, just call me up, and we can I can make sure you're on correctly. All right, so now let's start with Java. So Java is currently the #1 used programming language in the world. Right behind it is Python and JavaScript. JavaScript, you don't want to mistake JavaScript with Java. Java is a server-side programming language, and JavaScript is a client-side. So what is Java? Java is, it was created in 1995, so it's 25 years old. It is owned by Oracle and has more than 3 billion devices run on Java right now. It is it can be used for mobile applications, especially Android apps, and desktop applications, web servers and application servers, games, database connections, and much, much more. And where I work, we used to write, we did write originally our online application using all Java. So the front end and the back end. The front end is what's seen to the user, and the back end is the database that's behind the scenes. And what we found is the front end being written in Java was anytime we had a simple change to make, it's a real process to try and change Java and get a build into place just to make a simple one-word change. So what we did was we rewrote our application and we wrote it in JavaScript, but we kept the backend, the database connection, using Java. And Java is amazing for the backend. I wouldn't recommend it for front-end web application development, but people do use it. So, so Java is used just in so many different ways, and that's why it's the most popular language right now. Java works on many different platforms like Windows, Mac, Linux, even Raspberry Pi. It's easy to learn. I think it's not easy to learn. I wouldn't say that. There are other languages like Python, JavaScript that I think are simpler to learn. But once you get into it and understand the concepts of all programming languages, then yeah, I do believe Java is a pretty simple language to understand. Let's see, Java is object-oriented, which most of the current programming languages out there are object-oriented. And that helps you get a clear, it gives a clear structure to your programs and allows code to be reused. And so it makes it very portable and makes it easier to develop applications. All right. So let's talk about the syntax of Java. All right. So what we're going to do, if you look on my screen, off to the left, I've got a very simple first program that you can run. All right, so that includes a public class called main. All right, so you have a class. Inside the class, you have a public static void main, which is your main function. And then inside the main function, you have system.out.println, hello world. So if I run this, it will simply print out the words hello world. So I will show you. So I'll run it. So that by doing the run through W3 Schools application, it compiles my Java code, and then it runs that compiled version of the code. So if you look over to the right on the output screen, we have hello world. So if I simply change hello world to welcome to Intro to Java. Now I'll rerun this. It will compile and it will run. And now off to the right, I have welcome to Intro to Java. All right, so this is a very simple, rudimentary first program. And now let me explain line by line what is in my program. So every line of code in a Java program has to be in a class. All right. So in our example, we named the class main, M-A-I-N. So if you look at the first line of my code, I've got public space class space main and then a curly bracket. So a class should always start with an uppercase first letter. All right, Java's case sensitive. So if you called your class if I called my class my class, let's see. If I change this to my class, right? Main. Then that would be different than me calling the class my class, all lowercase, lowercase my class. So be careful because Java is case sensitive. The name of the Java file must match the class name. So when this file is saved, if I run it again, the previous time I ran it, my class name was main. So that what that does when I click on the run button is it creates a file called main.java. And because the file name has to match exactly the class name in your Java program. So outside of my class is a public. You also have to change this. Like that. Let's see. Let's see what happens when I run it here. All right, the nice class, my class. All right, so it doesn't seem to like that name. I will go back to main. And all right. All right. So just remember when you're saving the file name has to match what the name of the class is. And you would give it the extension, when saving the file, you give it the extension of .java. Okay, so, all right, so the main method on the second line, all right, so this method is called main, is required, and you'll see it in every Java program. And it will always be published, space static, space void, space main as the method name, parenthesis, and then you have strings, and then opening bracket, closing bracket, space args, ARGS, closing parenthesis. So this is required of every class that you run. Every Java program has to have a main method, and you put it right up front underneath the first line where the class is defined. Any code inside the main method will be executed. You don't have to understand the keywords for and after main. You will get to know them a little bit later. For now, just remember that every Java program has a class name, which must match the file name. And every program must contain the main method. All right. Now, in our program here, in this rudimentary program, this first program for Java, inside the method, when the method is called, it's going to run this third line, which is system.out.println, and then welcome to Intro to Java. And what that is println, PRINTLN, is a method to print whatever inside the parentheses. It'll print a line of text to the screen, which when we run our program, you can see that it prints out, welcome to Intro to Java. Notice the curly brackets, right? So you have to have the curly brackets, opening and closing curly brackets to contain what's in the class. And you have to have opening, closing curly brackets to contain what's in a method. And right now we're only dealing with the main method, the required main method. All right. All right, now let's talk about Java comments. All right, if you've done any programming in other languages, there's always a symbol that the language uses to be able to comment your code. And the purpose of commenting code is twofold. It helps you remember if you come back to your program, like a month later or a year later, to remember what you were trying to do in each section of your code. And the other thing is, what if somebody else starts working on your program? You want them to understand it by being able to read comments. Now, you don't want too many comments because it'll overwhelm your code with just too many lines of unnecessary comments. But so you just want to find some middle ground where you are documenting very briefly the different things you're trying to do inside your Java program. So for a single line for comments, what you use is the / 2 forward slashes. So // just have to place my cursor in the right place, right there, space. So / and I'll say this is a print line. Now, if I run this, the words "this is a print line" will not appear, but it'll be inside my code. It'll be commented, telling me what that line is going to do. So I will run it, and it should just show on the screen, on the results screen, "Welcome to Intro to Java," and it shouldn't say anything about this is a print line. And let's see what happens here. There we go. All right, so all it does is print out "Welcome to Java." So that is for a single line comment. Now, if you want to have multi-line comments, I say I wanted to get really wordy. Well, how about right here? That I just remembered. That's another reason why you would want to use coding or comments in your code. Is say you're running your code and you find a problem. There's an error in your code, but you just don't know where it's really happening. So a lot of times you can comment out different lines of code to be able to eliminate possible problems. To be able to by process of elimination, be able to eliminate potential lines of code that might be causing a problem. And that way you can narrow down your problem a lot easier. So that is another reason to use comments. So say I say I want to do a multiple lines of code, and the way to do that in Java is a / asterisk. Oops. Go up. So if I do / asterisk, and I say, this is my first Java program. Isn't it a beaut? And then I would close that out with asterisk / All right, let me try and run this. So that's what you use if you have multiple lines of comments. And sometimes you will. And see, it's just the result on the right side of my screen just is welcome to Intro to Java. It doesn't display any of the comment. So that is for multiple lines of comments. And that's about it for comments. So let's move on to variables. So in Java, there are different types of variables. For example, there is a string which stores text, such as the word hello or welcome to Intro to Java. There's int, which stores integers or whole numbers without decimals. There's float, which stores floating point numbers with decimals, such as an example would be 19.99. There's char, which is for car, which is char, which stores single characters, such as lowercase a or uppercase b, or and char values are surrounded by single quotes, just like string values are surrounded. Well, string values are surrounded by double quotes. Char values are surrounded by single quotes in Java. And then lastly, there's a Boolean value, which stores values with two states, either lowercase true or lowercase false. So in Java, if you want to create a variable, you have to specify the type, and then you have to assign it a value. All right, so I'm going to get rid of my comment. On the top there. Now inside my program, I'm going to add another line. All right, so we're going to print out that, and then we're going to create a variable. Okay, so the way to declare a variable, you start with the type, and then the variable name, then the equal sign, and then you give it a value. All right, so where type is one of the, okay, so all right, so if we want to store text, we're going to use the string type. All right, so string, uppercase S string is the Java type. And I'm going to call my variable name, space, equal sign. And then we'll call this person Bert, double quotes, and end each Java statement with a semicolon. All right, so now I define the variable. It's a type of string, and the variable name is name, and it has a value of Bert. So let's see how this looks when I print it out. So to print out, wrong place. All right, so to print out, I'm going to come down here, and I'll do capital S system dot out dot print line, and then parenthesis, and I'm going to print out my variable. And the way to do that is just without double quotes. I'm going to put inside the parentheses of the print line the variable name, called name, we'll say. And got parenthesis and end it with semicolon. All right, so when I run this, I should have the name Bert come up. All right, so if you look off to the right on my screen, we've got welcome to Intro to Java, and underneath it, I'm printing out the value of the variable called name, and that value is Bert. All right. All right, now I'll show you how to create a variable called that's a type of type int. So I would do int, lowercase, and I'm going to call this num. So the variable name is num equals, and I'll give it 200 or 225, and semicolon to end the statement. Now I'm going to print out again. So system dot out dot print line. Let's see, and I will just print my num variable. Num, let's see, semicolon. On it. And you see on the right-hand side of my screen, underneath the word Bert, it prints out the value of my num variable, which is 225. Now, if you don't want to assign any value to your variable, you can do that when you're declaring the variable, and you can assign a value later. So say I have my num variable, and I just have int space num, the name of the variable, semicolon, without the equal sign in a value. Let's see what happens if I run it now. Variable num might not have been initialized, so it doesn't seem to like that too much. So I think before you go and print out the value of the of a variable, you have to give it a value first. Run it, and that should print out the value of 0. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, if you define or declare a variable and don't give it a value, you can't use that variable in Java until it has a value, until you've initialized it. So what you are able to do is you could do this. When you're declaring the variable, you have to give it a type. So in this case, I gave it a type of integer, and I named it. All right. Now, before I go to print it out, I have to initialize it. So to initialize it, I would just do num equals 340, semicolon. All right. But I couldn't do num equals 340 underneath the sysout print, because that generates an error. So if I run it this time, now it prints out 340 correctly. So I mean, this doesn't really make sense to do it in two steps, to declare it and initialize in separate steps. I mean, you might as well do it all on one line. Now, say why don't I go back to how it was? So it equals 340, semicolon. And later on I want to print out later on I want to so I print out the variable named num, and after that printout I want to give it the variable num a new value of, say, 500, semicolon. And then I'll print that out too. That print line num, semicolon. Okay, so now I should print out 340, and then I change the value of num, and I should print out 500. All right, and that's what it does. If you look on the right of my screen, it prints out 340 and then 500. Now, what if I didn't want this to happen again? Say I want, when I define my variable num and give it a value of 340, say I want that to be a constant in my program. Well, what you can do in Java is you can put the word final in front of the type. So I put final space, and then the type int. Now, when I run this program, it should print 340, and then it should print 340 again. Even though I'm trying to change it to 500 before the second print, it shouldn't allow me to do that. Not with the word final in front of it. Error, num equals that. So, assign a value to a final. Oh, okay. So when you use the word final, it'll generate an error when I try to change the value down here where num equals 500. It's going to generate an error saying you cannot assign a value to a final variable num. So just so you know, there is a way to set up constants in your program. All right, so let's see what else with variables. So I'm just going to show you real quick some of the other types of data types that Java uses. So in my program on the left, I'm using the type string, I'm using the type int, and what else did we do? How about float? Float is, I call it my float num, and I'm going to give that a value of 5.99. All right. And what else can I do? I will show you the car type. My letter equals, and this is, remember, cars are a single character surrounded by single quotes, and strings are infinite characters surrounded by double quotes. All right, so I'll just do A, semicolon, and the last one is Boolean. And we'll do my bool equals true. And for Java, in Java, Boolean values are lowercase true or lowercase false. And we'll give it a semicolon. Now I'm going to print out all of these values. So I will show you how to concatenate multiple values that you want to print. So the first value was a string, and that's name. All right, then a plus sign. And plus. I like to put spaces after the variable names, and then the plus sign, because it's neater to read. And then int, and then my float. Remember, it's case sensitive, so uppercase F float, uppercase N num, and then my letter. Lastly, my bool. All right, let's run this. And I'm going to comment out the print of the name up above. If I can get there. Slash. The print of the num. Slash. All right, and when I put the two forward slashes for a comment, it turns the line of code green. Everything you got commented turns green. All right, so I'm going to run this, and it should be one big print. All right, so it didn't like that. Plus, I have name, num. Oh, it's not int. Sorry. So in my print line, I put, instead of num, the variable name of num, I put int. A mistake. Space. Okay, I'll run this. Another error. Oh, there's nice float. So I think it should be 5.99 lowercase f. All right, so when you have a float, you want that lowercase f in there. Try that. Let's see if that'll finally work. All right, so now my letter, my bool. Okay, should be good. Yep. Welcome to Intro to Java. All right, so we have Bert, and then we have 340, then we have 5.99, then we have a single character A, lowercase a, and then we have the Boolean value true. All right, so this is all crowded. So how can we space that out? So we're printing out all the different variables that I created, the 5 different types of variables. And say I want, what if I want like a comma in between each variable value? All right, so I'll do a plus. So I'll do the variable. The first variable is name, space, plus, space. And then I'm going to do a double quote, because I'm going to do a string. Double quote, comma. Double quote, space, and I have to do a plus sign. All right, and then I'll come over here, and I'll do double quote, comma, double quotes, plus. Double quote, comma, and plus. Plus sign, I got one more, comma, that, and that. And that should do it. All right, so I'm going to run this. So that's how you can have values of variables and strings included. So now I have a comma in between each of my variable values to make it a little bit neater. And another thing I can do up above where I define the variable name, the type of string name, what I can do in my print, say I want to uncomment this out. All right, and I will go to, in front of name, I'm going to do the string. Hello, my name is, comma, space, double quotes, space, and then to concatenate, I use the plus sign. Hello, my name is, comma, space, and then it'll print out Bert. So let's see what happens. All right, so this is kind of crowded, so I'm going to use my commenting skills. So I'm going to comment out the first line, first print line, which is welcome to Intro to Java. And then I'm going to comment out multiple lines down below where I'm printing out all the different types of variables I made. And so I'll do / asterisk, and then down, way down here after my bool, I will, let's say, I'll go down here, and oops, that's not what I want. I want so for multiple line comments, I want / asterisk, and then you want to end with asterisk, wherever it is, whatever it is, asterisk / All right, so that comments out all that stuff. All right. So now we're just going to print out this line here, which has a string of words and then the value of a variable called name. I run it, it should say, hello, my name is, comma, Bert. And that's what it does. All right. So, let's see, how we doing? And those example. Okay, so now for numeric values, right, I'm going to take this out. So I'll comment out this code and this one. All right, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to get rid of all this. All right. Okay, so if I have an int, 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 all right, x is going to equal 5, semicolon. And then I have int y equals 3, semicolon. Int z equals 4, semicolon. All right, so if I want to print these out, I can do capital S system dot out dot println parenthesis, and I'll say, I'm just going to add them all together. So x space plus space 3 plus, not 3, y plus z, parentheses, semicolon, So if I run this, it should print out 12. 5 plus 3 plus 4. And that's what it should print. And that's what it does. All right. So if I wanted to do, I can do, so in this case, the plus sign is actually a mathematical operator. So if I do x instead of a plus, I can do a minus, x minus y, and then I could do multiplication, y times z. Let's see what happens. All right, we're gonna run it. And we are, what are we gonna get? 12 minus 5? And we're gonna get 5 minus 12, right? So x equals 5, and it should be minus whatever y times z is, which is 3 times 4, which is 12. So 5 minus 12 is going to be a negative 7. All right, so that's how you can use these mathematical operators to do mathematical operations with your int variables or your float variables. If you wanted to declare all these variables in Java, what you can do is you can just separate them with a comma. So they don't have to be on one line, and you don't have to keep naming the data type. In this case, we have 3 variables. They're all of type int. So as long as they're the same type, you can put it on one line. So I can say int, it's going to be their types. X equals 5, comma, y equals 3, comma, and z equals 4, semicolon. And I can get rid of these down here. All right. So now if I run this, so it's a lot neater, simpler code by doing it that way. And see the result after I run it is the -7 once again. All right, so when you're naming variables, you want to make sure you have names that describe what it is, that really identify what they are. And the variables have to be identified with unique names. I can't have, I can't define, like in my program right now, I have the variables x, y, and z. I can't define x again because it won't be unique. It confuses the program because you'll have 2 variables named x defined in different places in your program. Now you can initialize, or you can initialize s with, for example, a value of 5, like I have here, and later on I can say x equals 10. I just can't say int x equals 10 because that would be defining it again. So, and you want to create understandable, maintainable variable names. So, depending on what the variables are going to be used for, this variable s might be a lot better to say, how about minutes? Let's say, let me go there. Instead of s, or a single letter variable, which is not descriptive at all. How about minutes per hour? And notice I'm using camel case in the variable names. Camel case is the first letter of the first word, in this case is minutes, is lowercase. Then every first letter of every word after that is uppercase. So the next word is per, which is uppercase P, and the next word is hour, which is uppercase H. All right, so see how the minutes per hour is so much better, is so much more descriptive than just X. All right, so make sure your variables are descriptive, make sure they're unique names. And here's some general guidelines on naming variables. All right. Names can contain letters, numbers, underscores, and dollar signs. That's it for the special characters, just the underscore and dollar sign. Names must begin with a letter, though. And they should start with a lowercase letter, cannot contain white space. Meaning they're, between words, they can't, like my minutes per hour couldn't be minutes, space, per, and then space, hour. There's no white space, no spaces. Names can also begin with a dollar sign and underscore, but we will not use it. We will not be using those. So just start your names with a letter. Names are case sensitive, which we already talked about. And there are reserved words in Java, such as int or Boolean, that you cannot use as your name because they're used by Java, so it just confuses Java. So that's it for variables. Now let's talk a little bit more in detail about the data types that those variables are. All right, so data types. So far we've gone over 5 different ones, right? We have string, we have char, C-H-A-R, lowercase. We have int, we have float, and we have Boolean. All right, so and there are other data types out there besides for numbers, besides int and float. There's also called it's called short, and there's also called short, long, double, but they're just not used a whole lot. So and Boolean, has values in Java of lowercase true or lowercase false, and the string has to be surrounded by double quotes, and char is just a single character that has to be surrounded by single quotes. All right, so all right, so we have all those. Right. So in Java, we have something called typecasting. There are 2 types of typecasting. There's widening casting, which is automatically controlled by Java, which converts a smaller type to a larger type. So The smallest type is byte, and the next in order of magnitude. So you start with the smallest type is byte. It can go to short, then char, then int, then long, then float, then double. All right, so that would automatically be handled by Java. So as the value got bigger, it would automatically know to cast it as a different type, one that is bigger. Now, the other type of casting is called narrowing casting, which is manually done. So you're converting a larger type to a smaller size type. So if you have, like, the biggest type is double, and you want to cast it down to a float or down to long or down to int, char, short, and byte, that narrowing casting would have to be done by the programmer. So let me show you an example of widening casting. All right. So real fast, let's say. All right, so if I have an int, go here. So if I have an int, I'll call it my int. My int. That's my variable name. I'll give it a value of 88. All right. And then I am going to do another variable of type double. I'll call it my double, and equals my int. Now my int is an integer and has a whole number value of 88, and I'm giving that value to double, to a double, a variable that's of type double. And semicolon. Oops. So this is called widening casting, which is automatically done by Java. Now, if I do a sysout print line, and I want to print my int, I'm going to print out my int. Space. And then I'm going to do a separate print line. System out print ln my double semicolon. All right. So what should be printed out is my int, which is 88, and then on the next line it'll print out my double, the value of my double, which would be 88.0, because the double is has a decimal place. I'll run this. So this is an example of widening casting. As you see in the results on the right-hand side of my screen, I've got 88, which is the value of my int, and 88.0, where it automatically cast the value that it was given to a double value. All right, so now here's an example of narrow casting, right? All right, so say we have double my double, But instead of my int, so narrow casting is where I had to manually cast it. So say I'm going to start with my double, but it's going to have a value of 9.78. All right, and what if I got rid of this up here? So after my double has been defined, I'm going to do an int, my int, and I'm going to equal it to parentheses, oops, I'll do it here, and I'll cast it as int inside the parentheses, space my double, semicolon. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'll put a comment in here, manually casting double to int, right? Because I start with my double, which is 9.78, and I want to put that into my int, which is an integer. It can't handle the decimal places, right? But if I put this in parentheses, if I put int in front of my double after the equal sign, that will manually cast it, the double value, into an int, and it'll produce 9. So let's see what happens. I'm just going to print this afterwards. I want to print the double first. And so this is an example of narrow casting. System.out.print line, parentheses, and now I'll print my int. All right, so we start with my double. It should print out 9.78, the value of my double. And then I manually cast my int to be the my double value in the form of an integer, which should be 9. So if I come up here and I run this guy, you look to the right of my screen, you will see first it prints out my double, which is 9.78, and then it prints out 9, which is the value of my int. So that is widening casting, which is automatically done by Java, and narrow casting, which has to be manually done by you, the programmer. So that concludes my first session of Intro to Java, offered to you by the Clifton Park Half Moon Library. My name is Scott Bartow, and I hope you've gotten something out of this tutorial. And please, if you haven't registered with the Clifton Park Half Moon Library yet, please register with the class. We'll keep it open until to the final session, the 4th session, and so you can register at any time. Once you register, I will invite you to my Google Classroom, where you'll be able to see the different exercises after each session that you'll be able to practice with, and also be able to communicate with me and get answers to any questions you might have. So once again, thanks for joining me tonight, and look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks a lot.